Welcome to the podcast of MotorWeek, television's original automotive magazine. MotorWeek is made possible by TireRack.com, RockAuto.com, and by Die Hard. Here's your MotorWeek podcast host, John Davis.
And welcome everyone to a very special edition of our MotorWeek podcast. This is podcast number 100. Yay. We have reached the century mark. Thank you, Alec Webb, who has introduced every one of our podcasts. And because this is a very special podcast, we have a very special group of people around our table today. And online here at Studio C at MotorWeek Central, we have our road test producer, Ben Davis.
Hello.
Who's probably been on more podcasts than anyone except myself. Assistant producer Greg Carlos.
Hey there.
Our writer, producer, two-wheeling reporter Brian Robinson.
I can't possibly convey just how happy I am to be here.
You spit it out.
Twice.
Our writer, Patrick Lucas.
Hello.
Who also serves as our podcast producer. Now, special post-production editor and podcast creator Bob Mixter has joined us today.
Hey, how you doing?
And he's not used to being on this side of the microphone, but very, very special. Our very special guest today on the phone, our former public relations manager, podcast producer, Michelle Parker. Michelle.
Well, thank you for letting me finally join you at the table. I had to sit ringing that bell for, 6-7 years?
Come on now. You didn't always want to participate. You were very happy sitting over in the corner.
You did join us
the
on
truth
one.
comes out.
Now, Mr. Robinson's got to correct you on something.
You did join us on one podcast, remember?
You are correct, sir. Boy, he has a good memory, doesn't he?
But it's the bell that Michelle is most noted for, and bringing that concept to the show. Look, we're going to be talking with Michelle and Bob about the origins of our podcast, what it took to actually get them online, and it wasn't as simple as you think. All things Motor Week are up for grabs today, and we are actually going to talk just a couple of moments at the end about two of the latest vehicles we've been testing. We're fresh back from drives with the new Lexus NX and also the Porsche Macan, so we'll cover those too. But let's start off with, Michelle and Bob, why don't you kind of talk about how the podcast started? Because when we started, and Bob, you can fill us in on, what was the date?
September 3rd, 2008.
Step up to the microphone there, Bob.
That's all right.
September 3rd, 2008. Michelle, do you agree with that?
I agree. I was looking on the website earlier today because it didn't seem like it was that long ago, but apparently it was. And it was really Bob who was a real fan of podcasts and listened to them and said, hey, why don't we try to do this? These guys, all they talk about are cars. Why not put some microphones in front of them and they'll be able to speak more freely and more at length, I guess, than you could talk about in like a 3 or 4 minute piece that actually airs on the TV show. So I think, Bob really was the force behind all this, I would say.
Bob, why did you think we should do it?
I was used to listening to podcasts, mostly technical podcasts, a lot of good information, kind of get to know the people that are in the podcast. And I just figured the MotorWeek fans, they'd want to hear more information on cars. You
tell us both, you two, about what it was like to kind of sell the idea. Do you remember? Was it a hard sell? I mean, I don't. Now when it's been so successful, it's easy to say, "Gee, why didn't we do this before?" I mean, that was 6 years ago almost.
Michelle reminded me that John, you were probably the most enthusiastic.
I thought it was a great idea that you guys came up with.
Not everybody wanted to be that enthusiastic about
Why?
it. I don't know. Just something different.
One of the things that has always been true for the 33 years MotorWeek's been on the air is that a lot of the folks behind the camera don't want to get in front of the camera. And, of course, microphone's the same deal, I guess. Ben, you weren't very reluctant. You were pretty enthusiastic, as I recall.
I'm always on board.
And some of the new people on the staff, like Patrick and Greg, you kind of grew up doing this kind of stuff just, in high school and college, right?
I mean, podcasts are nothing new to me. I've listened to a few in my time, and I enjoy it.
Greg?
Yeah, I wouldn't say I grew up doing them, but I definitely, when I started interning and working here, I was always around them, and it seemed like a fun time. You guys made it seem fun, so I wanted to be a part of it, and luckily I am.
With every podcast, though, and with everything we do, there has to be one person who has a memory for everything, and I'm sitting next to him today, and that's Brian Robinson. I've never met anybody that can hold as much information that we've passed through our offices in one way or the other. I don't know,
The only thing he holds he holds grudges pretty long.
It's a blessing and a curse. I was probably one of the least enthusiastic about doing it, just for the fact that I don't even like hearing myself talk. I can't imagine that anyone else would enjoy it. So
I think Brian was like the breakout star of the podcast.
I agree.
Remember,
Yeah.
John? He filled in a few times for you, and he was great. He took it and ran with it. He's got a great sense of humor, coupled with all the information that he knows about cars, which is vast.
you guys are making me blush.
Yeah,
I
he
know.
fakes it pretty well. But when I'm not here, I have no fear that there's plenty of people that can sit in my chair, and Brian has done it. And who else has been a substitute host?
Should we talk about Brian Roberts and his reluctance?
Well,
He's in the studio right in there.
Brian
so.
Roberts, who
He
is...
does his guest appearance for the Detroit Auto Show every year. So.
Yes, he does, and he was on. I was reminded he was on the very first podcast. Brian, for those of you that don't always connect the voices with the face, is one of our senior executive producers, and he's downstairs running the ship today. But we couldn't quite pull him up to the studio. He Michelle, I don't know. He did it for you, but he's not always agreeable otherwise.
Oh, you offer him the best car that you have. Maybe you can. The Bugatti or something.
Chances
Maybe
are he's already got it.
Right. You can't. There's nothing, right? There's nothing you could offer him.
Michelle, now that you have been gone from us for a while, off to pursue other pursuits, do you miss the MotorWeek lifestyle that you came in? I mean, people don't realize that Michelle basically was able to kind of hold this ship together for quite a few years. She was not only our public affairs and public relations manager, but a lot more. She inspired us, along with Bob, just to try new things. And I'm wondering, do you miss us? What do you miss about being here?
Yeah, no, I do. I miss the TV world, actually. I've kind of been back and forth in and out of TV and public relations, and I'm not currently working for a TV station, and it's just a wonderful environment in terms of creativity and trying new things and new ideas, and people have great outsized personalities, and you really get to do. I got to do a lot of stuff with you guys that I probably won't have the opportunity to do in the future. Running that sweepstakes, that was a lot of fun, and I know you guys had a good time going out to Vegas and fast cars. What could be better? Doing podcasts, the website, and kind of dabbling in social media. And I got to do a lot of wonderful stuff with a great group of people. So I definitely miss it.
Well, we miss you too. It goes without saying. Bob, I'm going to put you on a spot. Bob is a jack of all trades when it comes to our show. He actually is the editor that assembles every one of our TV shows every week, both for public television and for Velocity. And Bob, how long have you worked on our program?
Back in the early 80s.
Wow, that long.
Yeah, went out in the field on some of the road tests. Yeah.
So you've actually been associated with MotorWeek probably longer than most everybody else on the current staff, with very few exceptions. Yeah. Why did you stay so long, Bob? What was it? What is it that keeps you coming back for more? We keep beating you up, and you keep coming back for more.
This is John Davis asking you the question. The answer was
That's right.
Yeah, but I'm not his direct supervisor, so he can be honest.
That's true. It is a good bunch of folks, and the show is great. I've had some fun memories in the field, some crazy memories, and
you want to share any of those? Besides the fact you're pulling your hair out at the last minute because something isn't quite right.
Yeah, that happens more often now than it did back in the. I can remember going to Summit Point on a road trip.
The racetrack.
Yeah. And at the end of the day, we were at one end of the track, and they were divvying up people to get back to the beginning. And John said, "Here, you can come with me." And we got in a Ford Mustang, and I think we hit the first turn faster than I've ever, as a passenger, been in a car. I was probably still trying to buckle up when he hit the turret. I will remember
I actually
that.
drove that fast? That's amazing.
Well, maybe it wasn't that fast.
Well,
but
it seemed like it was at the time. Say, Michelle, do you have any memory of when you were with us that really sticks out?
Well, I would say that every February to the Chicago Auto Show was a lot of fun, a lot of work, and we, as you know, expanded into when the auto show dedicated one day to social media, where we invited all the MotorWeek fans in the Chicago area to join us, and got a great reception. And I know they were always so thrilled and amazed to be walking around the Chicago Auto Show with John Davis. I mean, they were just so beside themselves.
Yes.
So that was always
just shows you how much they know. Well, that was another innovation that you helped bring along, because the Chicago Auto Show was actually the first of the major auto shows to embrace the social media, and they set aside this special social media day. And the manufacturers were encouraged to do something with their followers. And I remember coming to you and saying, there's this extra day. We're going to be there anyway. What should we do with it? Because, Michelle, people probably aren't too surprised to hear that an old dog like me was kind of dragged kicking and screaming into the social media days. And Michelle was the impetus behind that. They really got us on Facebook and so forth, and got out there to talk with the new generation of viewers and listeners. So it was a pretty interesting time when you were with us. You were very innovative.
Oh, well, thank you. But you should give yourself more credit. I mean, really, you always are open to the idea of new things, even if I don't always completely understand.
We're going to pat each other on the back here. Hey, talking about traveling to Chicago, it is interesting that you go to Chicago and Detroit during the worst times of the year. But sitting around the table are the real-world travelers of the show that go off on these automotive previews, which can be anywhere from down the road in the Washington, D.C. area to halfway around the globe. Let me kind of go around the table. Ben, where's the most interesting place or unusual place you've ever gone to test a car?
Without a doubt, it was was Dubai with the McLaren SLR, or it was a Mercedes SLR 722 edition, and we were up in the mountains of Dubai, and it got pretty sketchy up there.
Tell us about the military confrontation that you had.
That's what I was talking about. Yeah, I'm riding in the car, and I'm twisting around these mountains, and all of a sudden there's it looked like an armored car. It looked like a tank, but it had wheels, and people with automatic weapons all over the thing, and a 50-millimeter turret on top that started tracking me as I'm winding around the turn.
And you're in a McLaren?
Yeah.
Okay.
And I was on the gas, just getting out of there at that point. I'm more scared than I've ever been in my whole life. I thought I was going to get shot. But later I found out that they were just training, and when they see fast-moving objects like that, they usually track them with their guns and stuff, just to keep in practice.
Back in the days when we used to go to the Chrysler Proving Ground in Chelsea, Michigan every year, Chrysler at that time still was involved with building the Abrams tank, and there was a particular course that they would let us use, and the tanks would sit up practicing exactly the same thing, checking their rangefinders and tracking mechanisms. So you would see this turret and cannon following you around the racetrack. It's not a real cool experience. Greg, most interesting place you've traveled with us in your relatively short time with MotorWeek?
Yeah, I don't think it was crazy interesting, but for me the best one was probably Germany. Just the fact that I got to go drive on the Autobahn, which is, every car guy's dream is to be able to just unleash whatever you're driving. And luckily I was in a Mercedes, so what was I in, like a E550 or something like that. Yeah, so it was fun, man. It was it's cool seeing those signs that are just like, hey, have at it. And do
you remember how fast you went?
I was at, I guess, roughly 135, 140 miles per hour. That's not kilometers.
So you were over 200 clicks.
Yeah, well over. But yeah, I got lucky enough, because there is a lot of traffic on that road, believe it or not, because it's got to be a really pristine road to be able to drive it that fast. So I was lucky enough to get in a few spots where I could let it go, and yeah, I was up there. It was cool.
Patrick, how about you? You've been a few places for this show. I have to say, even this summer, I've barely seen anybody around the office because you've been traveling so much.
I was lucky enough to get the Subaru trip to Iceland, and that was a pretty interesting experience just because I never thought in my entire lifetime I would go to Iceland. Just never crossed my mind of places to go, but that was in November, and they had a really bad storm right when we got there, and so we were out up probably about 3 or 4 hours from Reykjavik, in just basically in the heart of the island. Really bad snowstorm, 80-mile-per-hour wind gusts, stuff like that. And we were testing the XV Crosstrek hybrid, so we didn't get to test at all what the fuel economy was like. We're just trying to get through
and just survive.
Yeah, and so we got stuck out there, and we had Land Rovers and Nissan Patrols all jacked up. They were guiding us. They got stuck. So they had to call this big tractor with 50-inch wheels to come out there and replow the roads. That thing got stuck. We were sitting there for hours and hours and hours, and the PR people, the guides, they're all I don't know how we're getting out of this thing. But finally, the weather kind of broke, and we got out, and it was definitely a lot of fun storytelling that night.
That was an adventure. Yeah. Can you top that, Mr. Robinson?
Definitely not. I've been fortunate enough to be, most of Western Europe, which is always enjoyable. Probably the most memorable. I was going to South Korea. I got a chance to go there and go to the Hyundai Proving Grounds and meet with a lot of their folks. And just the whole Asian culture is very interesting. The people are kind of fascinating, and I'd love to get back there on my own time at some point in time, but very memorable.
Well, a lot of people don't know about our businesses. While we do travel a lot, often the turnarounds are pretty crazy. You generally arrive one day, test the vehicle, and then you're back on the plane, sometimes the second day, sometimes the third. I remember the first time I got to go to China, it was for the Beijing Auto Show, or Shanghai Auto Show, actually. And I arrived, we went to the show the next day, and, traveling all that distance, it took, I don't remember, 20 hours to get there, let's say, and 20 hours back or so. But I flew back with the same airline crew I flew over with. So they had been there just long enough to rest up so they could legally fly back. So as I'm getting on the plane, they said, "We remember you." And it was all familiar faces. So to travel that far and stay basically less time on the ground than I did in the air going back there and back, which we've all done probably a number of times by now. So you see the world, but you don't really see much outside of your hotel room or where you've got to go to try out the car. So when people ask us, do you really love to travel, I think we have to think twice before we always respond. Michelle, you didn't get to travel too many places with the show, did you? I mean, Chicago, and that was about it.
February.
New York.
What happened, John? Come on.
Well, I don't know. Yeah, it seems to me that it was kind of an open invitation if you wanted to go, but it just didn't always work out. But before I let Bob and Michelle off the hook, the most memorable thing you can remember about your time with the show? Michelle, I guess you already said something about the Chicago Auto Show, but I'll put you on the spot first. Anything else that pops into your head that you really, when you're old and gray down the road many years from now, you'll be thinking about us, and it'll be tops of your memory?
Oh, gosh, there are just so many things. I mean, the night that you got your Emmy Award, that was a lot remember
Keeps coming back to me, Michelle.
I know.
You're not on the payroll anymore.
Here's one. That was, remember we ran the sweepstakes?
Yes.
A year and a half ago, and, you try to cover all your bases, and luckily in the end our base was covered, but Superstorm Sandy hit New York.
Yep.
The day before a name was supposed to be pulled by our marketing company in New York City, and they were flooded, and they ended up being able to pull the name, and it was, in, of course, all the legal documents that an act of God covered, your deadline for pulling a name, but I distinctly remember that as oh my gosh, we thought of everything, and in the end we did, but that was a close call that was interesting, but I just have a lot of overall very just fond memories of everyone at MPT and you all and MotorWeek, and just the great fun we had doing the Chicago Auto Show and all that good stuff.
Yeah, I remember you coming into my office that day, and your eyes were the biggest I've ever seen. saying, oops. Bob, what about you? Is there anything when you're eventually put yourself out to pasture that you'll look back and remember us fondly of? That may be a long time in the future, longer than probably for me.
I guess just a long history.
The long history.
Of being with MotorWeek. Like I said, in the field. I don't know if you remember this, but I did studio audio when you were doing raps in the studio.
Boy, that was a long time ago.
That was a long time ago, too.
Yeah.
And then back around 2000, I started pitching the idea that you guys ought to come to the Avid and do some nonlinear editing. And as I remember, that was also a little bit hesitated.
It was. Bob is largely responsible for the show you see today is not only because of Bob's technical expertise, but because, just like the podcast, he's always been a very forward thinker. And you had to drag us kicking and screaming into the digital age to some degree, because we were used to editing a certain way and doing things a certain way, and it was very familiar. But you've also always been someone who likes efficiency, and you saw how we could cut down on the time. The byproduct is that Bob actually now probably fixes more things than he ever had to before, because he gets the show and puts it together, and he has the expertise to find all the little flaws. So when you watch our show and think very kindly of us and note the high quality of the show, I think Bob, more than any other single person in this building, is responsible for that. So thank you, Bob.
Well, you're welcome.
Very good. Well, before we wrap up this nostalgia trip, let me go around the table. Again, we're here. We've done 100 podcasts. Where does MotorWeek go from here? If you were in my chair or one of the chairs downstairs that Brian or Dave Scrivener has, where would you take the show? Where do you want the show to be 10 years from now? You want to start?
Still on the air.
Good call.
Good call. Brian?
Yeah, I think it's all about social media these days and interacting with the people that spend their time, taking in your product. So I think, as much as I may not be into it, I think the whole social media aspect will continue to grow, for sure.
Patrick, any thoughts?
Yeah, I agree. Social media, the whole internet sphere, that whole side of it. I just think there's a lot of, I don't know how, because that's a lot to think about, but sort of different takes you can have, different approaches you can take or bring to, I guess, what MotorWeek does best, which is, reviewing with a certain voice. So there's a lot of different ways, a lot of new ways that I would be very curious to see how we approach that.
Benny?
Yeah, I'm just thinking the last couple of years we've scared up a whole bunch of different ways to get our message across. So next 10 years, I'd just be looking forward to each and every one of those years to try to find new ways to do it.
Greg, any thoughts?
Yeah, I really like what we're doing online right now. I think it would be cool to do some more online-only stuff. We kind of dabbled with it a couple months ago with that Around the Block segment that Benny and I did. That was one of those things that we just had, some spare time and thought, hey, this would be cool to get out there. So if we work that into a regular thing, I think that would be awesome, because I think people enjoy that just as much as they enjoy podcasts, kind of casual talking about cars.
Bob, technology-wise, anything you see coming down the future that we need to be prepared for?
No, nothing.
We're almost there at the moment.
We're doing pretty well.
Certainly we do more and more with smaller cameras instead of
absolutely
big cameras.
Absolutely. What we're doing with the copter and the GoPro stuff and the sliders. Just
Michelle,
really
from the outside, you see TV probably still, from a broader viewpoint than a lot of us do. If you were still with us, do you have any concept about where we should be? From either a viewer standpoint or a fan?
Well, I think you've done a lot in terms of the past couple of years of having the MotorWeek folks being more involved in the actual pieces, all your online first look pieces and cameras in the car. I think that was a huge step forward, and, who knows where the next frontier is. If we could have predicted it, we would have all been very wealthy with Facebook.
Yeah.
But, wherever the next frontier of social media is, digital, in terms of, I love to do the binge watching when I have a chance on Netflix. So it's all, video on demand. I know that's still available, via the PBS website, and, expanding that, because people like to just sit there and just watch it and watch more episodes at one time.
What was the number we saw this morning? In June on Facebook, we had almost
It's like 660,000.
yeah,
roughly.
almost 2/3 of a million hits, which was a record for us. So, and I know some people do a lot more than that, but that was a big number for us, and we expect to keep that growing because, as you heard from all the comments, we're trying to do more and more things that are dedicated just for online viewing. And I agree with that. While TV is going to remain very relevant, that more and more people get their content online through downloading.
I think we can get over 1 million. We need everybody else's help. Everybody listening, go
All
watch
right.
some videos on YouTube.
Go to YouTube, especially now that we're putting up so much exclusive content that these guys are doing on their own immediately when they get back from a press trip. Our aim is to have a video from the press trip online within 48 hours of the plane landing, and so far they've been doing it. I applaud them for all that work. We are going to cover two very quickly cars that just so if you've tuned in and want to know what's the latest stuff we're driving. So let's get to that really quickly. And Michelle, I'm going to ask you to hold on just for a couple minutes so we can give you a proper goodbye. Ben, you're back from driving the new Lexus crossover utility, the NX, the smallest Lexus crossover they've done yet.
Yep.
Give us some impressions.
Well, it's definitely aggressive looking, which it stands out among its competitors. You got X3, Q5, and things like that. So standing out, it definitely does well. Not everybody likes it, but I think it's kind of aggressive and youthful.
I must admit, they've toned it down from the show car. The LFNX I thought was ugly.
It still looks like a stealth fight. It still looks like it should be in a video game, though. It's crazy. Jumping inside of it, it's pretty tight inside. It's very cockpit-oriented. 2 adults in the front. It's definitely snug, but it's well done. It's beautiful inside. All the technology you could want. Even on the S-Sport package, they don't joke around. It's super tight. It's about as tight riding as a Corvette, and it handles. It's the real deal. So if you want that aspect of it, it's there. And hybrid as well, you can take that. Front-wheel drive or all-wheel drive, I mean, it's a big-time contender. It'd be interesting to see how it does against some more established European choices, though.
They say it's based on the RAV4 chassis, but it's totally different as far as tuning.
It's
a lot
almost
different.
entirely different. It shares the same wheelbase and I think the same firewall and one other aspect, but they definitely
turbo.
drive it home that it's completely different than RAV. Yeah, first-time turbo engine for Lexus, a 2-liter turbo. It did a great job. I'd like to see that in other things. I'd like to see maybe an FRS or something.
Now they've got 2 all-wheel drive systems. They have a regular mechanical one, and then if you want the hybrid, you get electric motors in back like the Highlander hybrid.
Right. It's pretty wild. It'll sense your yaw, or when the front wheels slip, it'll engage that motor in the back and drive the rear wheels. And aside from that, it's along for the ride, except for under heavy braking, it can capture regenerative energy, that motor in the back.
That's pretty cool. Patrick, turn to you for a vehicle that everybody really wants to know about because they've been talking about it for years, and that's the new Porsche Macan.
There's a lot to cover, so what do you want to know about it?
Did it fulfill the Porsche attitude like the Cayenne? And what do you think?
Yes, definitely. I know a lot of people, myself included, just thought, oh, it's Porsche's version of the Q5, but it's not. It
not.
shares the wheelbase, but I was asking the Porsche people, they said less than 25% of it is shared parts. The rest is all Porsche developed. But yeah, very sporty. Of course, being Porsche, a ton of options. You can option way up. The S, 340 horsepower. It's a 3-liter twin-turbo V6. The turbo is a brand-new 3.6-liter twin-turbo V6, 400 horsepower. It's definitely a lot more sport-oriented than it is high-end luxury-oriented.
How do you think it compares to the X3 or the Q5?
What I like to compare it to is the SQ5. That's the closest thing in terms of performance numbers. It's a lot more sporty. If you get the air suspension, which is a classic class exclusive. You can dial it way back to a more luxury setting, but otherwise, other than that, it's sporty.
There's all the meat with the potatoes for this edition of our MotorWeek podcast number 100. Michelle, any parting words before we let you go?
Well, are you going to invite me to podcast 200?
You betcha. Except we're going to make you actually come out to the podcast.
You can come out in your flying car. And
there you go.
Yeah, my flying car.
It sure was great having you with us today.
Thank you. Thank you for inviting me. It was a pleasure.
And I wish you all the best, and you and your family moving ahead. But just don't forget us here at MotorWeek.
I certainly won't.
Bob, any parting shots, words?
No, it was a pleasure to be here.
May we do 100 plus more of these, and goes for MotorWeek in general. Our thanks to our road test producer, Ben Davis, our assistant producer, Greg Carlos, our writer-producer, two-wheeling reporter, Brian Robinson, our writer, Patrick Lucas, and Bob Mixter, our podcast creator and our post-production editor. And, gee, you know, the bell is still here, folks. And on the phone, our former PR manager and podcast producer, Michelle Parker. Also, audio engineering today, both Jim Bigwood and David Wainwright, who control all of the audio you hear on all forms of MotorWeek. And again, our podcast creator, Bob Mixter. I see Bill's his brother.
He's gotten quite a few shout-outs on these podcasts.
He has. And podcast producer today, Patrick Lucas. Thanks to all of you, and thanks to all of you out there listening to all of our MotorWeek podcasts. And be sure to catch MotorWeek, the television show, not only on your computer, but on public television stations everywhere and the Velocity cable channel. Till next time, I'm John Davis. For all of us at MotorWeek, thanks for watching, listening, and just being there for MotorWeek.
You have been listening to the podcast of MotorWeek, television's original automotive magazine. MotorWeek is made possible by TireRack.com, RockAuto.com, and by Die Hard. For additional information on podcasts, videos, and showtimes, visit our website at MotorWeek.org. And watch MotorWeek, television's longest-running automotive magazine series each week on your local PBS station.